This is a Dynamite Network podcast.
Hi, welcome to the Dynamic Duel Podcast, a weekly show where we review superhero films and debate the superiority between Marvel and DC by comparing their characters in stat-based battle simulations. I'm Johnny DC.
And I'm his twin brother, Marvelous Joe.
And welcome to episode 400. Normally, we would be doing a team duel on an anniversary episode such as this, but Marvel and DC decided to release all of their content all at once at the end of summer, so we're getting caught up on some reviews, one of them being Suicide Squad Isekai.
Yeah, our next episode is going to be The Outsiders versus X-Force. That'll be our team duel. But first, we get to talk anime with our good buddy Zach Hepburn from the Senjo World podcast, which is part of the Dynamite Podcast Network. We'll get him on the line later on this episode.
Right, he's going to help us review Suicide Squad Isekai. It's a pretty fun anime, and we're going to talk all about it later on. There's no comic book movie news to break down this week. As always, we list our segment times in our episode description, so feel free to check out the show notes if you want to skip ahead to a particular topic.
Our artificially intelligent duel simulator, AJ9K, has a quick message for our listeners, so listen up.
Why, hello there. Do you want even more from this podcast? Then become a part of the Dynamic Duel community on Patreon, where you can choose from 3 tiers. The Dynamic 2.0 tier gives you access to our Discord chat server, the Fantastic 4 tier gives you 2 bonus episodes each month, and the X-Force tier makes you an executive producer of this show. Lastly, the Dynamite Podcast Network tier lets you create your own podcast using this Monte Carlo simulator. Johnny and Joe will help you develop your show, provide graphic support and consultation, and get you simulation results. Pitch the twins your ideas via email at dynamicduelpodcast@gmail.com. Check it out at patreon.com/dynamicduel. Pip pip cheerio.
Thanks, AJ9K, and thanks to everyone who supports the podcast. Be sure to tune into the other shows in the Dynamite Podcast Network this week, including Max Destruction, which pits your favorite action heroes from film and television against each other. This week, hosts Scotty and Gilly are pitting Tallahassee from Zombieland against Rick Grimes from The Walking Dead.
That is going to be a great episode. I can't wait for that. On the Senjo World podcast, host Zachary Hepburn speculates on fights between fan-favorite anime and manga characters. This Thursday, Zach will be finding out who would win in a fight between Trunks Brief from Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Uranus from Sailor Moon.
Sailor, you're what?
Shut up.
On the Console Combat podcast, hosts John and Dean find out who would win in fights between popular video game characters. In yesterday's episode, Joseph guest hosted, and he and John determined who would win between James Bond 007 and Sam Fisher from Splinter Cell.
And that, I gotta say, was a blast. Definitely check out that episode, guys, after you listen to this episode, especially if you like video games, if you like James Bond. It's a whole lot of fun.
Visit dynamicpodcasts.com or click the link in our show notes to listen to all of the shows in the Dynamite Podcast Network.
But with that out of the way,
quick to the No Prize.
A No Prize is an award Marvel used to give out to fans. Our version, the Dynamic Duel No Prize, is a digital award we post on Instagram for the person that we feel gave the best answer to our question of the week.
Last week we asked, who do you think was the best cast Marvel or DC villain of all time? And of course, this was coming off the news that James Spader is returning to voice Ultron for the upcoming Disney Plus Vision television series.
We got a whole lot of answers this time, 9 answers total, so it's always heartbreaking when that happens because I feel like we let so many people down by not choosing their answer for an honorable mention, but you guys all gave great answers.
Let's go ahead and break down this week's honorable mentions before revealing the No Prize winner. Our first honorable mention goes to Scott Camacho, who said,
on the DC side of things, it's easy. Heath Ledger's Joker cannot be beat. I mean, if you look at every other Joker iteration, all of them are still trying to get a piece of Heath Ledger's shadow. But for the Marvel side of things, nothing can beat Tom Hiddleston's Loki. What RDJ was for Iron Man, Tom Hiddleston was for Loki. Everyone else, every villain can be replaced, but Tom's Loki remains the same.
And he got cut off at the end right there. But yeah, Tom Hiddleston's Loki, I think, is the best villain in terms of casting for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He had such a good story leading from the first Thor film all the way through Loki season 2. And I hope it's not done. I hope Tom Hiddleston comes back to the role and we see him in future Marvel stories. It'd be better because he's a great actor and he's perfect in the role.
As was Heath Ledger as the Joker. It was a
Not so much.
I'm sorry, what?
Not really.
Shut the hell up. His performance was groundbreaking. It was a absolute tour de force, playing one of the most iconic villains of all time. He won an Oscar for the role, and even with Joaquin Phoenix also winning an Oscar for playing the Joker, Heath Ledger arguably is still the best actor to do it.
So great answer, Scotty. Our next honorable mention goes to Cat Stevenson, who said,
Hi guys, it's Kat again, and I think the most legendary casting for a villain in Marvel or DC is Josh Brolin as Thanos. Nobody else would be able to bring the gravitas and might needed for a character such as Thanos. His delivery of lines is so powerful and moving, there's nobody else that could do it. Even if the character is entirely CGI, he is the character.
Yeah, Josh Brolin's performance as Thanos was exemplary, particularly in the world of motion capture animation. Yes, the character of Thanos was an all CG character in the movies, but so much of Brolin's performance showed through, which made Thanos feel so lifelike and real. And the visual effects team did a great job. Obviously, so did Josh Brolin, and he will always be remembered as that character of Thanos.
Yeah, I'm still surprised by how he played the character. Like, I remember reading comics with Thanos in it, and I always thought he was much more maniacal, but Josh Brolin played a much more subdued version of the character to his benefit, I think, because I think he made him sympathetic in a way that I never really found Thanos to be. And in that sense, I think he kind of elevated the character with his performance.
For sure, he made him believable. He made him feel real.
Great answer, Kat. Our next honorable mention goes to Caleb Folk, who said,
Hey guys, Caleb Folk here, and I think the best casting for a Marvel or DC villain has to be Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin, not only in the original Spider-Man trilogy, but also coming back 20 years later and playing the same character just as well, if not better, in the Spider-Man No Way Home movie.
I think I've said this a few times in our reviews of the Spider-Man films. Willem Dafoe is perfect casting as the Green Goblin because he has a natural goblin face.
I mean, not only that, the guy is a fantastic actor. Not the best looking, but appropriately so for a character like the Green Goblin. I'm so glad that Kevin Feige did not try and recast the character for the MCU because, yeah, you cannot do better than Willem Dafoe for Norman Osborn. He's so unbelievably sinister and maniacal. He was born to play the role.
For sure, for sure. So good answer, Caleb. We want to give a huge shout out to Cyrus Moore, Jacob Bell, John Starosky, Miggy Matanguihan, and Waldo for taking the time to visit our website and leave us an answer. But the winner of this week's No Prize is Travis Bailey, who said,
Travis Bailey here. What's going on, fellas? Shout out to my good twin. Man, it's been way too long. All right, look. Y'all gonna get like 4 or 5 different Jokers. Y'all gonna get Kingpin. I hope y'all get a Scarlet Witch for sure. Let's talk about it. But it's Ian McKellen. It's Magneto, Ian McKellen. Iconic. I mean, unassailable casting. Him and Professor X. Look, that whole franchise was just hot toilet water, but they got those two right for sure.
For sure. I think Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen can largely be credited with giving validity to the whole superhero genre, as they did back in the year 2000 with the movie X-Men. I think before their casting, superhero movies were largely seen as juvenile stuff, kids' fare, Blade notwithstanding. But when X-Men suddenly cast these 2 Shakespearean actors who so perfectly embodied the roles and manifested them in such a way that elevated it from the page, I think a lot of people stood up and took notice. And the genre owes a big debt to Ian McKellen, I think, for helping get this whole thing started, really.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that Jack Nicholson and Danny DeVito were amazing as, Joker and the Penguin, and you would be right. But they also had a degree of comic book camp to their performances. Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart played their roles, like you mentioned, as if they were basically Shakespearean in nature. When they first made the movie, they were master thespians at the top of their craft, and they'll always be remembered, at least to me, as those characters in those iconic roles.
So congrats to Travis Bailey for winning this week's No Prize. If you, the listener, want a shot at winning your own No Prize, stay tuned to later on this episode when we'll be asking another question of the week. And now that that's done,
not onto the news, because there's no news. So we're just going to go on to the question of the week.
Out of the 400 episodes we've done on this podcast, what has been your favorite episode of Dynamic Duel and why?
Record your answer at dynamicduel.com by clicking on the red microphone button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, which will prompt you to leave us a voicemail. Your message could be up to 30 seconds long, and don't forget to leave your name in case we include you on the podcast. We'll pick our favorite answer and award that person a Dynamic Duel No Prize that we'll post to Instagram. Be sure to answer before September 7th. But with that out of the way, now let's move on to the main event of this episode and get Central World's Zachary Hepburn on the line to help us review the DC animated series Suicide Squad Isekai. Suicide Squad Isekai is a 10-episode anime series produced by Wit Studio, the same anime studio that produced the first 3 seasons of Attack on Titan, which I have not seen, but I hear is incredible. Joseph and I are definitely not as well versed in anime as we are in comics, so to help us out in our spoiler review, we've enlisted our resident anime guru and the host of the anime-focused Dynamite Network podcast, Syndrome World, Zachary Hepburn. How's it going, Zach?
Good. It's good to be back. It's good to be back and finally doing a review with you guys.
Yeah, we haven't had you on the show since you and John reviewed Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man, with us.
Yeah, that was a couple years ago. So yeah, I'm excited to be back. I love being part of the group, part of the family.
Yeah, it's great to have you as a part of that family, especially for this episode, because I know you love anime. You, like I said, are the expert in it in our group. I have to ask, when you first learned that they were going to make a Suicide Squad anime, what did you think?
When they first announced it, I was like, really? Suicide Squad? Because at that time, everything was Suicide Squad, right?
Yeah.
So
the video game?
Yeah, I was just like, the video game let us down. But this, I don't know. I found this redeemed it for me. Redeemed the Suicide Squad.
Really? That's pretty cool. So in regards to Wit Studio, the producers of Suicide Squad Isekai, they did the first 3 seasons of Attack on Titan. Have you seen those seasons? Like, are you familiar with Wit Studio? And did their involvement get you excited at all for Suicide Squad?
To be honest, I'm not really a guy who pays attention to what studio is doing what. I just enjoy anime, but I am familiar with Attack on Titan. I had never finished it, but I watched like the second last movie they put out. Okay. So I just have to go and finish it. So I am pretty well versed in the world of Attack on Titan. I'm not the biggest fan, which hence why I haven't finished it, but it is good. It has a kind of a messed up story. So I don't know. It's kind of dark. And if you're into that kind of thing, then...
There's a few animes that I've been meaning to check out, especially since you've started your show. Attack on Titan is one of those. Yeah, it's just so hard with having this podcast and having to watch all the stuff that we're currently in the middle of having to watch, including this one. Although I was looking forward to this one. Like when I first learned that they were making a Suicide Squad anime series, I was pretty pumped because like the idea of the Suicide Squad, these super powered prisoners forced to carry out these impossible missions, lends itself to a very like pulpy and formulaic format like anime, where the goal isn't marketability so much as cheaply giving the audiences what they want. The almost Tarantino-esque approach that James Gunn took with 2021's The Suicide Squad film, and after successful DC animes like Batman Ninja and My Adventures with Superman, I was so ready for a hard-edged Suicide Squad series that could like up the maturity level to match some of my favorite anime series like Neon Genesis Evangelion or Sword Art Online, which I believe fits within the isekai subgenre of anime.
Sword Art? Yes, technically, but that one was all virtual and it was a video game. And isekais, literally, people are sucked into another world.
Yeah. If the listeners are not familiar with isekai, the word literally means another world in Japanese and refers to like the new, often fantastical world that the story's main characters find themselves in and have to learn to navigate. The only isekai I think I've seen is Sword Art, but I've heard the most popular is Re:Zero, which was written by Tappei Nagusuki. I'm mispronouncing that, I'm sure. But he was the lead writer on Suicide Squad Isekai as well. Now, the premise of the Suicide Squad operating in a fantasy isekai land is pretty absurd, but that didn't really bother me because I feel like the concept of the Suicide Squad thrives in absurdity. And it's not like we haven't seen other comic book characters like Batman or Captain America in medieval fantasy settings before. The fantasy world this series sets up is kind of confusing, I think, but it's essentially one where a kingdom of humans is warring against an empire of orcs and human-animal hybrids known as demi-humans. There are elves and dragons. It's basically World of Warcraft, I feel.
Yes, it's definitely fantasy magic and not just kind of like medieval.
Yeah.
So this was definitely my thing. Like, I love swords. Give me swords, magic all day.
Yeah, like swords and sorcery adventures. Those are awesome. I love those too.
And you put anime with it, it's just like the best thing ever for me. So
and it's always cool to see like familiar characters in a new setting like that, like Dark Knights of Steel, that comic series that's going on right now for DC, seeing Wonder Woman and Batman in these magical swords and sorcery settings. I love that.
There are certain things that draw me in, and if the characters are badass, if the fights are badass, if the power sets are badass, I'm all for it.
Which they definitely had a lot of that here. I thought it was pretty interesting what they did with a lot of the characters. But the story for this series is essentially that Amanda Waller wants to plunder the Isekai's resources on behalf of the US government. So she sends suicide squads in to establish a framework with which to do that. The first squad she sent ended up defecting and helping the Empire. So she sent a second one to do the first one's job, but they ended up siding with the Kingdom against the Empire and the other squad. It's actually a pretty cool Suicide Squad versus Suicide Squad premise, and one that allows us to see an expanded roster of DC supervillains that I didn't think we were going to get to see in the show.
Yes, I love the cast. Like, I always want most of those characters that were in this to be on one team with each other. So just to even just have them face off, just be in the same series, I loved it. I loved it.
Like, there's been times in the comics where, like, the Suicide Squad goes up against the Justice League, but to have a Suicide Squad go up against another one is just a really cool concept. I thought there were going to be more deaths on one side, but it was pretty much all on the first squad. But the characters were awesome. I think the coolest thing about the show was the designs they came up with for the DC characters. And this was something like we noticed even from the trailers. Like, Harley Quinn was a character tailor-made to be in anime. She looked fantastic and very much like an amalgam of Margot Robbie's looks from the two Suicide Squad films.
Yeah, I have to say, Isekai Harley is probably my favorite version of Harley Quinn ever.
I agree.
The way she talks, like, oh, here's the question for you guys. Did you watch it in English or did you watch it in Japanese?
I started to watch in English, but I had a hard time getting through some of the line deliveries. For some reason, I just think sometimes things sound better in Japanese. So I switched over to Japanese within the first few minutes, and I stayed with that the rest of the way through. I thought the voice performances were great in Japanese.
No, they were amazing.
Same. I started like the first 10 minutes in English, and some of the translations from Japanese to English don't always work that well. I find that I can much easier accept the dialogue when it's being read in the native language it was written, because I think it just carries a slightly different context, language to language. And yeah, it's just more digestible, I think, in Japanese.
I agree, totally. Like, there are some very good English voice actors, but when it comes down to it, I find they just can't beat the Japanese ones because there's so much passion. They love what they do.
Yeah, and it's not even just the acting, it's also the writing. Like, a voice actor can only do so much if the translator didn't do a good job of translating, you know? And
True.
So then all of a sudden they're being fed corny lines.
For sure. And so the reason I was asking that, I was curious if there was swearing in the English version, because I didn't watch the English either.
There was swearing. Yeah. Sometimes, I don't know why, I'd go to a next episode and HBO Max would default to English. So I'd hear part of the episode before I managed to switch over. And there was cussing.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because I was like, this show, like, I love the way Harley Quinn talks. And if they didn't kind of do it the same in English, it's just not justice. So if you watch it in English, watch it again in Japanese. It's so much better.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah.
I have to say, though, like, the versions of these characters are definitely my favorite versions of them.
I think it's because they borrowed like the best parts from the two Suicide Squad films. Like even in the roster, like mixing them from both versions. Like you had Deadshot, Katana, Enchantress, Killer Croc, and Joker from the first film. And then you had King Shark, Peacemaker, Ratcatcher, and the Thinker from the second. Clayface was really the only original one in this show, though you could say he was borrowed from his supporting role in the Harley Quinn animated series. Mm-hmm. You know, he's very much a thespian with delusions of grandeur in that show. And in this series, they kind of ran with that while adding a bit of otaku fanboy for expository purposes and, you know, a more hip aesthetic.
Yeah, for sure.
I do want to talk about the animation quality. I thought it kept pace with the character designs. You know, I think this is probably the best animated work DC has put out this year for sure. And it may be the best animated project DC has ever put out in terms of animation quality. I thought it was better than Batman Ninja.
I agree.
Yeah, because Batman Ninja was computer animated. It wasn't hand drawn. And I believe this show was hand drawn. It looked great, I thought.
This show had amazing choreography when it came to the fights. Like some of the fights, I was just like, holy crap, DC. Like, You can do this? Like, what? Like, oh my God.
Did you have a favorite fight?
It was definitely Harley Quinn when she was going to fight the Thinker.
Yes, that was mine too.
That was cool.
And against Katana too, right after that. That was pretty good.
Oh my God, that's what I mean. She is my favorite version. Like, she can like fight. Like, that's the crazy thing. Yeah.
I gotta say, Zach, hearing from you that you thought the choreography in this show was good, knowing how big of a fan of anime you are and how much you watch, and also having a martial arts background yourself, that is high praise, I gotta say.
It does its thing. Like, it is so good. I was just blown away by it. I was just like, I can't believe DC's putting out this kind of quality martial arts. And I was just like, yes, finally, we have DC anime that clearly surpasses the Marvel anime. Let's do this, DC. We got this.
Even better than the animation in the show itself, I thought the animation for the opening sequence was insanely good. Like, I rarely skipped it. There were a few times I did, but I just enjoyed watching it. Paired with the music that they chose and everything like that, it really got me pumped for every episode, for sure.
Yeah, the music was, oh my God. Like, I don't know what it is, but when I'm watching something, I always kind of zone out and I just don't hear the music. Right? As I stated in, my Sailor Moon review, if it's not good, I just don't notice it. And every time the songs were on, I was just like, yes, this is perfect. And I'm like bopping out and everything about it. I am actually blown away by how good DC did with this project.
Yeah, I didn't skip any of the intros either when I was watching it, partly because of the music. But I would say I stayed for the end credits even more so for the end music, because that Mori Calliope song is not bad. I'm not really familiar with her work. I know she's like a YouTube thing, whatever. But yeah, I thought it was pretty good.
No, Amanda Waller gave me creepy vibes in the end music video every time.
No, I loved it.
When she's like grabbing her crotch and she's like, yeah, loosen my lips. And I'm like, whoa, that's obscene.
But I was like, that's perfect for Suicide Squad. It's perfect.
It is.
Right? But it's also perfect anime. I loved it.
Yeah, it was absurd in the best way possible. Like
yes.
Meme worthy. Now, I do have to say, despite the show's top-notch animation and character designs and intriguing premise, the show itself, to me, was kind of lackluster and boring story-wise. Like, I thought that's partly probably to do with the lack of stakes. Like, Suicide Squad as a premise is supposed to contain a degree of, like, macabre interest in finding out, who's going to die and how. But that was completely stripped from this series. The 72-hour time limit never really felt like a real threat because time itself was kind of all over the place in this show. And when Amanda Waller did trigger one of the neck bombs to go off, of course it was going to be Clayface, a character that wouldn't be affected, which I saw coming. a mile away. And that wasn't the only obvious thing that I noticed. Princess Fiona being confused for Harley Quinn was something I figured would happen as early as the trailers for this series. I do think that this season probably didn't need to be 10 episodes. But, as I've heard you mention before, Zach, anime is kind of known for drawn out seasons and filler episodes. So I guess the show is par for the course in that regard.
Most anime actually now are doing just 12 episodes end the season. So I'm not going to lie, I was a little upset I didn't have a little bit more. But I don't know. I think that's the thing with us anime fans is we want to see the sick animation. Like we love all the like we watch anime and like we'll go on YouTube and watch it slow down. That's like how like kind of invested we are. And that's how much we enjoy these fights that we see in anime.
It's cool that that passionate fan base exists out there because the animators do put a lot of like thought into this. You could tell when they do. It just looks so much better and is so much more fluid.
Well, what it is too is item placement or like hand placement, right? They do such a good job of conveying actual martial arts and actual strikes. And, when Harley Quinn hits with the baseball bat, it's very realistic. It's not cartoony. It looks like, somebody's actually hitting somebody.
Yeah.
They do a very good job of that in this, for sure.
Now, I'm not sure if Warner Brothers is planning on doing more seasons of this show, but it definitely feels like Wit Studio is in it for the long haul, which I also feel is like a risky move because, we as comic book movie fans are well aware of how often superhero projects get canceled or just scrapped altogether. Like, I'll be pissed if this gets canceled because the number of unanswered questions in this season is kind of ridiculous. Like, we don't know how Amanda Waller learned about the Isekai or who she used to open the portal to it. I mean, my guess was Enchantress, but they never followed up on that later. We don't know exactly what resources Amanda Waller is after or why she would send the Joker in her first squad if she knew how chaotic he was. There's just a ton of stuff that I want answers to that I thought we were going to get more insights on before the season wrapped up, but that just wasn't the case.
I think they're just trying to draw it out. Like, come back. If you want the answers, come back. Watch season 2.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, the Joker did say in the episode 1, like, this was prelude to a very long story. So maybe it is a really long story.
I might be talking out of my ass here because I haven't watched a whole lot of anime, but in the anime that I have seen, usually I found that the end of it is a little bit anticlimactic, actually. And it almost appears as if Japanese storytelling is more about the journey than the destination, I would say. So
absolutely,
even if this is the only season we got, I think it's really less about the end and more about everything that happened along the way.
You're absolutely right. I was watching a YouTube video recently that was sort of explaining how Eastern storytelling differs from Western in that it doesn't have a 3-act structure. It actually has a 4-act structure. Their 4th act kind of is an extension of the denouement after the climax, where it kind of tells a little bit more about the life of these characters. And it does feel anticlimactic because it doesn't end with a climax, which, Western stories typically do, or shortly after it. So I could see how that would be the case for a lot of anime.
Yes, no, that's exactly what they do. Whenever they end a series, it's always, boom, you have this big fight, and then there's one final episode that will like wrap it up and kind of even jump into the future and show you, no, hey, this is what they're up to now that evil has been defeated. Right? Mm-hmm. That is always kind of how it ends. But they space it out, right? So throughout their journey, it's multiple kind of climaxes, I guess you can say.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, I feel like all of the intriguing story stuff came sort of in the last seconds of the show with the reveal that the Joker had just killed the Emperor and taken his place. For a majority of the show, the audience is pretty much just as lost as the squad itself, trying to figure out what to do and what's going on. But that kind of makes sense, I guess, but maybe not for 5 hours. I felt like for a majority of the show, the characters are sort of just quipping nonstop.
And I mean, I think that's kind of just Suicide Squad in a nutshell.
I guess you could say that they did the same thing in the movies. It is a very comedic concept, so I could see where they would want to run with that for this anime series. Did you guys have a favorite, joke throughout the show?
I wouldn't have one per se, but I love the character of Clayface, how he was just like, we're in an isekai, and he would just point out everything. And so to me, that was kind of like my favorite joke. Like, him.
Yeah.
Clayface, yeah.
I really liked the bar fight scene that they did, I think in the 8th episode or something like that.
Really?
It wasn't just one joke per se, but just them starting a fight while this jester is trying to sing their praises about being a hero was pretty hilarious, I thought.
Then all of a sudden, Peacemaker, he has his pants off. It's like, what?
Yeah, I have no idea what was going on there.
Yeah, I rewound it because I was like, when did he lose his pants? Like
They were never
what?
on.
And I was like, of course they have to show some ass in a DC thing.
Of course.
Right?
It's the requisite DC nudity in animation. I have to say, my favorite part, I think, was the relationship between Deadshot and Ratcatcher. How Deadshot thought they were like the best of friends, homies. And then it turns out that he just really made Ratcatcher's life a living hell. I thought that was hilarious.
That was good.
In a world where fantasies collide and heroes clash, one podcast network rises above the rest. Prepare yourself for the ultimate showdowns in comic books, video games, movies, and anime. The Dynamite Podcast Network presents Console Combat, where video game legends brawl every Monday. Dynamic Duel, where comic book titans smash every Tuesday. Max Destruction, where TV and action heroes battle every Wednesday. And Sendro World, where anime champions clash every Thursday. Join us as we speculate on the matches and, armed with the power of mathematical simulations, discover who will emerge victorious. Visit dynamicpodcast.com, where we settle the debate and settle the score.
Let's talk about the characters more in our character breakdown, starting with Harley Quinn. She was the protagonist of the show and really both the heart and brains of the team, I would say. You know, she often gained inspiration for how to solve certain problems that the team encountered through her past misadventures with the Joker. Now, even though she pines for him throughout the series, you know, unaware that he's disguised as Katana in the Isekai, she proves herself to be an accomplished tactician without him, even concocting the plan that defeated the Skeleton Queen in the climax of the show.
Like I said, man, favorite version of Harley Quinn. She's something else. I love this version. I love her.
Did you have a favorite moment from the series with her?
I think when she kind of put the princess in her place. I was like, yeah, you tell her. You tell her.
Yeah, I liked her cute attitude. Like, she always called King Shark Nana-chan.
Nana-chan,
That's
yes.
right.
That
I
was
love
cute.
that too.
Yeah, and she had the pet dragon that she adopted, taking it on as its surrogate mother. She kind of became like the Queen of Dragons from Game of Thrones in that way.
That's true.
That was an interesting aspect.
That's so isekai though too, because the protagonist always gets a little pet.
It's rare that you see like the motherly nurturing side of Harley Quinn, but it was an interesting facet to the character displayed in this show.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned, she was definitely the heart of the team. If I had to pick my favorite moment from her in the series, I'd have to say it was probably her sword fight against Katana, like after they defeated the Thinker. I loved how Clayface all of a sudden became a sword, and then she just battled against Katana. That was so cool. Such a great fight scene. Probably one of my favorites in the entire series.
Oh, for sure. Especially how you would see the sword get destroyed, and because it's Clayface, he would just you would see them pick up dirt and reform the sword. And so, I thought it was so good.
That was really cool. Moving on to Deadshot, you know, the other members of the squad, they don't really have arcs. They're pretty static, and, you know, they're simply there to, I would say, fill out the 5-man band trope common to anime. As I mentioned, Harley was the heart of the team. Deadshot was probably the leader. He filled that kind of archetype since he often directed the team on, you know, where they would go, such as leaving to collect ammo or instructing the team to put on magic armor. My favorite moment with him in the series was how he ended the battle against Ratcatcher and his army with one bullet. I didn't see that coming. I thought we were going to have like an all-out army brawl, but for it just to end in that manner, I thought was great.
That was a quintessential Deadshot moment.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. For me, it was just how he got on throughout the series. I was like, yeah, you're cool. I'd hang out with you, Deadshot.
He was the coolest one.
Yeah.
Alongside Peacemaker, I would say. You know, Peacemaker, he's the team lancer or like the skilled rebel of the group. You know, someone who often clashes with the leader. And you definitely saw that in this series with him clashing with Deadshot. Now, I didn't love Peacemaker in this series. I thought he was kind of weird, like too stoic and very different from John Cena's take. But I guess they needed him to be a foil to the short-fused Deadshot.
I loved Peacemaker in this season. Yeah, he was my favorite character, actually. And I remember I was watching the show with my wife, and she was like, I thought the Peacemaker is supposed to be, like, funny. I'm like, maybe John Cena, as written by James Gunn, but from what I know of him in the comics, he's not that funny. He's actually a lot more stoic and serious of a character.
True.
So I like how they went that route with him, and just how, like, dedicated to his cause he was. He was funny in that sense.
Yeah, I think that worked for him. I have to say, I prefer this one over the John Cena one.
Really?
I would agree.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I'm sorry, John Cena.
That's fair. Moving on to King Shark. He was the big guy or the muscle of the group. If I had to pick a favorite moment with him, it was probably his battles with Killer Croc. Only because I was surprised to see Killer Croc. I always figured that King Shark would have been like more than a match against Killer Croc, especially with the healing factor that they gave King Shark in the show. But the show definitely upped Killer Croc's fighting skill, I would say. He was like a boxer, so it kind of worked.
Let's talk about that healing factor, though, because some of the characters seemed to get power upgrades, while some of the characters did not. Now, King Shark, he got a healing factor. Clayface, he got geokinesis.
Yeah.
And I guess Harley Quinn, I don't know, sometimes she was able to summon super strength or something like that. But what did the other guys get? It was not quite clear what happened to the other characters and like why their abilities were enhanced.
Yeah, I don't think they unlocked any special abilities.
I don't think so.
It's just those three.
Like even the guys on the other side, the other Suicide Squad members, they didn't really have powers either.
Well, Ratcatcher was upgraded.
Yeah.
He was able to control wolves.
But that was because of the crystal, right? Like it wasn't his power.
I wasn't sure about that. I thought that was unclear. In the comics, he has a device that controls rats as well. So I wasn't sure if he just got an upgraded device in this world or what happened. But I also thought Killer Croc got an upgrade because he was able to control that like underwater Leviathan.
Yeah, who was that guy? Where did he come from?
The Isekai.
That thing pissed me off when he first showed up because I was like, oh, sweet. We get Croc versus Shark. And then all of a sudden, 2 seconds later, stupid octopus fish thing grabs Shark and there's no fight. I was like, man, fuck that fish.
It didn't make sense. Maybe it was kind of like a dragon type situation where one of the bad Suicide Squad members had adopted a small fish as a pet or something like that, and then it grew. I don't know.
That makes sense.
But I guess if the good guys got the dragon, then yeah.
They could have the Leviathan. They did call it a Leviathan, right?
Yeah.
So,
I believe so, yeah.
And Croc called it's his little bro.
Yeah.
So you could be onto something there. But I think the other characters would develop powers and everything. I think if they do bring it back, then I think some of those characters will start developing powers, which I think would be pretty cool.
Although now that they have the armor that they got at the end, the magic armor, maybe some of them don't even need those just innate upgrades, magic upgrades, and they could just use the armor. Man, I know we'll get there, but that armor was incredible. I loved how it turned the entire show into like a Dynasty Warriors video game. I was pumped. I watched that scene twice, that whole thing. It was great.
It was great.
That is your typical like going Super Saiyan moment.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
What we would call it. Yeah. No, it was so good.
They even had like the transformation scenes. I thought those were great. Yeah. Those were funny.
Power Ranger, Sailor Moon type transformations. Yeah. Love it. Love it.
Moving on to Clayface. He was the absolute standout character of the show for me, probably because I've never seen the character done this way before. His alter ego, Basil Carlo, was an actor, and he's a diva on the Harley Quinn show, but he's never been like cool before, like he was in this show, or maybe like ironically so. He also provided exposition for the team, as well as the audience who may not have been familiar with the tropes from anime and Hollywood cinema. And that strangely made him the team's quote-unquote smart guy, while also being the comedic relief.
Every time he spoke, I was like, this guy's a dumbass. I love it. Right? So, yeah, no, Clayface is cool.
I really liked Clayface in this. He was definitely that kind of vain pretty boy type character, but it did make me wonder why the Clayface from the comics is such a tragic figure if he can shapeshift into a beautiful form whenever he wants to. He just like chooses not to. I don't understand why he doesn't do that, because this version of Clayface had no problem altering his appearance in that way, and he wasn't nearly the tragic character that he is in the comics.
You know, he had trouble maintaining his prior form. This show kind of did away with that. They made it so that he was a pretty seamless shapeshifter, but he's not always like that in the comics. He can't maintain it for very long.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, I totally thought Clayface was El Diablo from the trailers, but I was way wrong. It turned out Clayface just had expanded control over Clay in the Isekai, and that was visualized in this like glowy, fiery kind of a way. But I was happily surprised to find out it was Clayface. I was like, what? Okay.
I didn't fully know it was him until the end of the first episode when they did those character roll call title cards, kind of.
Oh, yeah.
Where each character got to showcase their ability in the fight when they first got into the Isekai. That was pretty dope.
My favorite moment from Clayface was probably when he brought down the fortress. Like, not only was it a great feat for the character, but I also thought it was just hilarious that the fortress ended up belonging to the kingdom.
Oh, are you talking about in the fight against Ratcatcher?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great showcase of his kind of intellect, how he was kind of the smart guy of the group, because in this weird meta way, he had an understanding of the situation that they were in, being an Isekai fan himself.
Right.
But yeah, it was his idea to bring down the water towers and to make the stone that they were standing on a little bit more malleable.
Yeah, no, he was definitely a lot more intelligent than he's ever really been portrayed.
But it totally made sense the way they did it, though, too, because, you know, being a fan of movies and just like culture and stuff like that, he was the geek of the group. Moving on to Princess Fiona, or Fiona. She was the literal damsel in distress, this demure royal with a traumatic childhood in which her friend as a kid was killed after she told him how much food soldiers in the war had. She made it her life's purpose to end the war, partly out of guilt, but she was too timid to confront her mother, Queen Aldora, even when the queen's behavior became more and more erratic and harsh. Eventually, she was inspired by Harley Quinn, her doppelganger, into becoming more independent and confrontational for the sake of her kingdom.
Yeah, I guess I don't have too much to say about her. I think her twist at the end was something that we all kind of saw coming, and they set it up pretty well, I thought.
I wouldn't say I seen it coming. Like, I had an inkling of it. I was like, why does she look so much like Harley Quinn? I was like, there must be something going on there. And I thought like, oh, maybe we're going to find, you know, this medieval version of Deadshot and the rest of the characters. So that kind of threw me a little bit for a loop. But like, I have to say my favorite moment with the princess was when she turns around and she's wearing the makeup.
Yes.
And she's like, I am sick and tired of this fucking shit. And just smashes the guy with the baseball bat. I was like, yes. I was like, do your thing, girl.
That was great.
The last character I do want to talk about is the Joker. He's a pretty mysterious character throughout the show, which kind of works for the character in that he should always be unpredictable. And while I do feel like he was shoehorned into the show's final minutes and that the reveal wasn't as shocking or as satisfying as it should have been, the more I've dwelt on it, the more I'm glad that he's being positioned as the series' main antagonist. I like the concept of the Suicide Squad versus the Joker, especially when Harley Quinn is positioned as one of the team leads.
Yeah, I definitely think that sets up something pretty cool down the line because, you know, once Harley Quinn finds out, she's going to obviously switch sides, and that's going to cause a whole bunch of drama. But then something's going to lead to her rejoining the Suicide Squad. So I'm very interested in how that whole thing would play out.
Oh, yeah. It's going to bring great conflict to season 2 if there is a season 2. I really liked this version of the Joker. I liked how philosophical he was. He was like this wise, chaotic anarchist. His whole motivation for doing everything that he did was to provide a more interesting life, I guess, for Harley Quinn and everybody else in the squad.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating. Like, he's such a wild card in that sense. And yeah, because it's hard to empathize with that type of thinking, it does make him very mysterious. And I thought it was actually a really damn good twist. My jaw dropped in the final minutes of the last episode.
Yeah, I did not see that coming at all. Like, I was like, oh, shit, okay. The Joker can scrap too. I was like, I love it.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the series, Joker theorizes that everyone longs to be part of a new world where things are more fantastical and free. You know, part of his motivation for causing havoc is to make the world a more fantastical place. And when he enters a literal fantasy world, he takes on the role of the mysterious wild card, like you mentioned, Joseph. You know, seemingly neither friend nor foe, up until the final moments when he decides to take charge of things and kill the Emperor because the Skeleton Queen's plan to unleash death on the entire world would have led to peace and quiet. And the Joker doesn't want that. He wants to see everyone live on the edge, as he says in his own words. It's a fantastic setup for season 2. It was a fantastic take on the Joker, I agree. So much so that I can't think of a recent version of the Joker that I think is as well done as this. As little as screen time as he had, I still think that he was done remarkably well.
I like how this version of the Joker took heavily from the characterization of Heath Ledger's Joker, even though they kind of made him look a little bit more like Jared Leto's.
Jared Leto could only wish that they would have had like the design insight they had for this Joker with like the tattoo of the smile.
That was sick. I liked that.
That was awesome.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask you guys, what did you think of the Joker's design? And yeah, probably one of my favorites.
I wonder why they didn't go this route in the 2016 Suicide Squad movie with Jared Leto. They did the thing where he tattooed a smile on his hand, but he had tattoos on his face already. So you would think that he would just put a smile on his face like they did in this anime.
You'd think.
I feel like if they did that, it would have been some big, goofy red smile, and it would have looked even worse.
But what if it had sharp teeth and everything? You know, I don't know. I'd have to see it in action, I think, before I totally sign off on it. But conceptually, I feel like it's there. I feel like it makes sense.
Moving on to the story highlights. In episode 1, as the Joker and Harley Quinn wreak havoc in Gotham City, they are attacked by Argus agents. The Joker escapes, but Harley is defeated and captured by Katana. Meanwhile, Argus's director Amanda Waller oversees the opening of a portal to another world. 6 months later, she tasks Belle Reeve inmates Harley, Deadshot, Clayface, Peacemaker, and King Shark with entering the Isekai to collect resources and implant time bombs in their necks that will explode in 72 hours unless they receive a radio signal from her regularly to discourage any escape attempts. Additionally, she blackmails Deadshot by threatening his daughter. Now, as the squad enters the portal, their helicopter crashes in a world that Clayface calls an Isekai before they are ambushed by orcs and an army of knights, neither of whom they are able to understand. Despite repelling the orcs, they are captured by the knights and taken to a prison fortress. Elsewhere, Katana and several supervillains speak to a mysterious figure. Now, the beginning of the series, after the Joker blows up those businessmen, him and Harley escape in this car that's controlled by a piano, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah, that's something you definitely don't see every day. But I mean, it kind of makes sense for the characters. I dug it.
Now, who do you guys think was the girl that Waller used to open the portal? Do you think it was Enchantress?
It seems like it was Enchantress because the way the portal manifested with that kind of emerald-looking visual was the same kind of visual that they used to portray her magic powers later on in the series.
No, I agree with that totally because, yeah, Portal was green, so who else? That's what I think.
I do wonder who took out the helicopter pilots. That was never addressed. Because like the agent, I think his name was Adam, goes to the front and the helicopter pilots look like they've been sniped. I don't know if that was the Joker or what happened there, but it was never addressed.
Yeah, you're right.
Good question. Yeah. Plot hole.
Because, yeah, like nobody else in that world would really know how to use a gun or have that kind of precision.
Right.
Right.
It would have had to have been the Joker, you would think.
I hope it was.
Yeah, especially if he could throw hands like that, he probably could shoot very well as well.
Just a jack of all trades.
I think he's like a super Joker almost. Like, not like he's not like actually super, but like he's very talented. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Any guy who could like play a piano like that, for sure talented. Moving on to episode 2, a royal court discusses the current war and their prisoners. Queen Eldora dismisses both the starving peasants and the squad's presence, but Princess Fiona believes the latter may be of use and orders her elite knight Cecile to bring them to her. Meanwhile, following the squad's imprisonment, Clayface tries to escape, but the guards put magical handcuffs on him that negate his powers. They later meet an elite Argus soldier named Rick Flag, who reveals he knows them, that they are meant to serve as Waller's Suicide Squad, and their predecessors went missing 6 months ago. He knows of an area where they can receive Waller's signal, and under the threat of their bombs, Clayface releases the other inmates while the squad start a riot and successfully take over the prison. However, they are reconfronted by the Knights, who arrested them. My favorite scene in this episode is probably in the prison cafeteria, where they're having trouble communicating with the orc, and it just leads to this all-out brawl. I love just how savvy the Suicide Squad was when it came to like prison politics. Clayface thought he knew what was going on, but he was really just a distraction for the others to up the ante.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I liked the orc prisoners and how through brawling with them and alongside them, they kind of became their allies.
Moving on to episode 3, before the squad can fight the knights, Flag stops them and attempts to reason with Cecile using words he learned from orc prisoners. Despite being insulted by this, Cecile follows through on Fiona's orders. They soon meet Eldora and Fiona, the latter of whom resembles Harley. After Eldora casts a translation spell to facilitate contact, Flag confesses that his previous squad escaped and became generals in the enemy forces. She demands the squad be executed until Peacemaker convinces her to let them take on a mission from her instead. She accepts under the condition that Flag remains imprisoned until the mission succeeds. After the squad regain their equipment, they take advantage of Cecile's fight with an army of werewolves to sneak into the werewolves' fortress, where they encounter Ratcatcher, who holds a grudge against Deadshot for slandering and humiliating him while they were incarcerated together. Using a magic scepter, he takes control of a pack of werewolves to seek revenge. Though the squad defeats the werewolves, Katana rescues Ratcatcher, who intends to control a different army to kill the squad. I loved how Rick Flag was talking to Cecile at the beginning of this episode. I was cracking up.
What did he call him again? He kept calling him like a stank ass or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Something. It was hilarious.
Moving on to episode 4, in a flashback, a young Fiona snuck out of the castle to befriend peasants, only for them to be killed in the war. In the present, Eldora refuses to release the squad despite their victory because they destroyed the kingdom's fortress. Harley berates Fiona for reminding the former of her old self, as Cecile explains how the war that Eldora's kingdom is involved in has lasted decades, especially after the elves and beastmen betrayed them. Ratcatcher takes command of a beast army and approaches the castle, and Harley recruits Eldora's prisoners to aid the squad, but Deadshot destroys Ratcatcher's scepter, causing his army to betray him and then surrender. As a reward, Cecile frees the squad, who leave to receive Waller's signal with 12 hours left on their bombs. The kingdom celebrates, though Eldora is displeased.
This episode was pretty dope. And that's what I was saying too. Like the whole thing of like the scepter is his main source of power.
Yeah.
Like I don't think they explained where he got the scepter from.
I thought it was just made with like magical artifacts that he probably got through the Empire.
Kind of the same way that Harley Quinn stuck that magic gem on top of her gun, and then all of a sudden it shot like magic bullets.
Yeah.
I think is what I'm guessing.
Okay, I mean, fair enough. I wasn't the biggest fan of Ratcatcher. I don't know why. I didn't like his design in this one.
I think they included him probably because Ratcatcher was in the Suicide Squad. I didn't mind it. I thought it was cool, again, to see like new faces, new comic villains, and see how they were interpreted. The purple mohawk was pretty wild, I thought. In episode 5, the squad reaches the portal, which is in the sky, in time to reset their bombs, giving them 72 more hours. They continue helping Eldora's kingdom, but Deadshot runs out of bullets. Flag says his helicopter, which was left on a mountain, has more weapons. En route, they stop and party with the former prisoners who were left in charge of the fortress, and Harley acquires a magical size-shifting frying pan. Upon reaching the helicopter, they find a dragon made a nest with it before it attacks them. While Harley uses the frying pan to deflect its fire breath, Peacemaker distracts it by stealing its egg, and Deadshot knocks it off the mountain with a rocket launcher. The egg hatches, and the baby dragon imprints on Harley, who names it Arthur. Flag secretly contacts Waller and informs her of the situation. She tells him to kill the traitors in the previous squad. After acquiring the weapons, the squad returns with Arthur, but finds the fortress on fire and the Enchantress and the Thinker looming in the sky. If any episode I thought kind of dragged on and was kind of boring, I thought it was this one.
It was like a transitionary episode. Like the first half of the episode, their whole motivation is just to get more ammo, to resupply, right? There's not a whole lot of plot going on here, except for the dragon fight, which was pretty good. And then the whole imprinting thing.
Episode 6. After finding their friends from the prison have been executed by brainwashed elves, the squad fights them, Enchantress, and the Thinker. King Shark is knocked into a lake where he is beaten and captured by Killer Croc and a sea monster. Thinker makes Deadshot, Clayface, and Peacemaker experience nightmares, then shoots them with a gun after Enchantress disapproves of making them suffer. Enchantress asks Harley to join them, but Harley refuses. Flag claims he can make the rogues' bombs explode, but the trio calls his bluff and leave. After Harley reunites with Deadshot, Clayface, and Peacemaker, the squad is re-imprisoned, and Eldora declares they will be executed to deter incompetence. Finding this unfair, Fiona and Cecile release them and provide a carriage. As the squad decides to take the fight to the villains, Thinker finds the portal and erects a tower around it.
I was confused at the end of this episode when Rick Flag was bluffing that he could blow up their heads because he had that controller device with their faces on it and everything like that. In the next episode, I was like, why doesn't he just use that? Because it wasn't entirely clear to me that he actually was bluffing. I thought he actually had their controls on him. Because it would make sense that he would, considering he was their handler. So I'm not sure why he didn't have the ability to blow up their heads.
Well, I don't think it was clear that he was bluffing until he let them go. Because I think he would have blown them up if he was able to, because he was under orders from Amanda Waller to do so, to kill the old squad. And he didn't do that.
Well, did he not have the controller when they got split up originally? So don't you think he would have just killed them?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think Amanda Waller gave him the control to do that. I think she was the only one who had the controls to blow up the Suicide Squad bombs.
That's stupid.
Yeah, that's weird because like even in the live action movies, Flag had the ability to blow people's heads up.
Yeah, I don't know. It was kind of weird in the way that they kind of teased that he might have that ability, but then I was like, oh, psych, who knows?
It's a plot hole.
I think it just went on to show that he never had that ability to blow up their bombs to begin with. But it does beg the question, why didn't Amanda Waller just blow them up from the other side of the portal?
Even when they were close to it, yeah.
I did like this episode a lot. In fact, I really liked the second half of this season a lot more than the first. I feel like once they started getting involved with more of the other squad members like Enchantress, the Thinker, then it really started to become more interesting. Moving on to episode 7, with a few hours left on their bombs, the squad discovers Thinker built a tower and fortress around the portal and is guarded by Katana and brainwashed elves. Clayface infiltrates the fortress and imitates Thinker to distract Katana, while the others distract the elves. Amidst this, Peacemaker captures one and tortures him to death, hurting the other elves due to the Thinker's linking of their minds. As Harley engages the Thinker, he enters her mind and sees a memory of the Joker seducing her. However, she commands the memory Joker to help her defeat Thinker, freeing the elves. As the fortress and tower collapse, Katana, who had defeated Clayface, kills Thinker and takes his thinking cap. Harley and Clayface join forces to defeat Katana, breaking her naginata and knocking her mask off, though she escapes. With their bombs reset once more, the squad celebrate by having Arthur burn down the enemy flag. When the kingdom receives word of the squad's victory, a furious Eldora orders them to be brought in dead or alive, horrifying and confusing Fiona and Cecile.
Absolute badassery when she's just standing there, just like holding the head.
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
Oh, that was so cool.
I was like,
wild.
what the hell's going on here? Because that's not Katana, but I didn't know who it was. I thought she was like possessed or something like that. But yeah, this was my second favorite episode. My favorite being the last episode. But this was a pretty good one. I guess my one question is, if all the elves' minds were linked, then that means if any of them like got, say, punched in the face in the course of battle, wouldn't they all feel like they just got punched in the face?
That's exactly what happened. Yeah.
Yeah, but like they went against the elves in the previous episode, and that did not happen.
That's a good question. I don't know. That's probably a plot hole.
You're just overthinking it.
Yeah. Yeah. Stop. What are you doing?
Anime logic. That's what it is.
I think maybe the Thinker didn't link up all their minds until they were all trying to find the squad. I don't know.
Sure.
Okay. That's as good a rationale as any, I suppose.
I have to say, I did get a little bit upset that Harley Quinn was holding her own against Katana, because in my mind, Katana is a much better fighter than Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn being more of a brawler, I guess, in my mind. But knowing that that was, in fact, the Joker in the sword fight against Harley Quinn, the fact that it was a more even match sat a little bit better with me after that reveal.
I agree, because like in the opening episode, Katana essentially wiped the floor with Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
Like she was like playing with her like a cat plays with a mouse. So when all of a sudden Harley was able to hold her own, I agree. I was like, what is this? But in hindsight, it worked.
Well, the thing too in anime is a lot of the power of friendship. And that's what I felt like she was using when fighting Katana in that moment.
Oh, with Clayface?
Yeah, so she kind of got like that ability buff and she was able to like throw hands.
In episode 8, the squad is invited back to the castle, but Eldora and her court refuse to thank them for their victories. One noble, ordered by Eldora before the squad's arrival, talks against them and slaps Harley, resulting in an enraged King Shark killing him. Eldora arrests King Shark and says he will be executed, then exiles the rest of the squad. Fiona tries to apologize, but Harley tells her off for not standing up for them and leaves her baseball bat behind. The depressed squad gets drunk at a bar, but tempers flare and they start a bar brawl. The next day, Flag contacts Waller about resetting the bombs, but when he tells her what happened, she declares them failures and detonates Clayface's bomb. An enraged Flag tells her off, but they spot that the castle is on fire. Waller says they have 24 hours to salvage the situation or she will detonate the others. After the call ends, Clayface regenerates. Flag leads the squad in rescuing King Shark and the castle. 2 hours prior, Fiona visits Eldora's room to plead for King Shark's life, but was horrified to see Eldora's reflection in her mirror is that of a skeletal monster. Great episode. I thought when that nobleman slapped Harley, I was like, oh shit, it's about to go down. And I was so happy to see King Shark just eat the guy right away.
Yeah, I was wondering which of the Suicide Squad members, or maybe even Harley herself, was going to kick some ass at that point. But it makes sense that it was King Shark.
Yeah, I guess I didn't say this earlier, but my favorite thing about King Shark, just in general, is how he's just constantly eating people. You know, he's just standing in the background and all of a sudden he's just got a foot hanging out of his mouth after he fought those elves. Right? I'm like, huh? When did he eat that person? So yeah, that was probably my favorite thing about Shark. And I was just like, get his ass, Shark. Like, you knew that was coming.
So I do have one thing to say about Queen Eldora secretly being the Skeleton Queen. They refer to this character as two different names in the remaining episodes. Initially, they refer to her as the Undead King, which I was like, what? Like, it's a woman character. Joker calls her Skeleton Queen in the final episode. It was just confusing as to what was going on with this character. I'm referring to her as the Skeleton Queen in my notes, but yeah, she was also referred to the Undead King. Did you guys notice that?
Yeah, and I was waiting for some kind of explanation. Like, are they talking about the same person? Like, what the hell's going on here? But they normally do that a lot in anime, is a lot of people will have, like, code names that only certain people know of and, like, who they are. So I guess I wasn't too surprised by it.
Okay.
So, like, say you're, like, an assassin, and, you know, they call this assassin the Silent One, but you're still, you know, Jonathan Garcia.
I feel like I was just honored with a nickname. I've always wanted that before. The Silent Assassin, I'll take it.
I've always called you Silent but Deadly. So still works.
I'll take either. Moving on to episode 9, a minister uses the thinking cap to brainwash several knights and turn them against the others. Fiona discovers the real Eldora was killed and replaced by the Skeleton Queen, who aims to spread death before Cecile rescues her. Tired of cowering, Fiona assumes Harley's makeup and baseball bat before knocking out the minister, ending his control. As the Skeleton Queen summons skeletons to attack Eldora's subjects and floods the castle, Croc attacks Fiona, but King Shark escapes from his cell and intercepts him. The rest of the squad soon arrive to help fight the Skeleton Queen and the rogue squad. The Skeleton Queen calls on the Enchantress for help, but Arthur has a growth spurt and joins Cecile in aiding Harley and Deadshot in fighting her. Using a magic gem to enhance her gun, Harley defeats the Enchantress before interrogating her, deducing that she stopped the Thinker from killing the others and is serving the Skeleton Queen because someone she cares about is being held hostage. Meanwhile, Katana lures Clayface and Flag to a giant skeleton, where a woman resembling the Enchantress is being held in a magical bubble.
I love that scene with Clayface kind of explaining, like, oh, a damsel in distress, and a dragon is always guarding something super, super valuable. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's hilarious. Like, just the way he describes the whole scene, and he's like, it's my time to shine. And she's like, relax, bro. Like,
The fact that he always thought he was the protagonist of the story, just so endearing for the character.
He's got that main character energy going.
Yeah.
Did they show how King Shark escaped from the prison? Because the whole goal of the squad was to get back to the castle so they could rescue King Shark from being executed. But like we never got to see, I guess, King Shark in danger of being executed because all of a sudden he was just in the battle.
Well, the castle was being destroyed and flooded. I imagine he escaped during that point because he emerged coming from the water.
That makes sense.
We didn't get to see it. It happened off screen, but I imagine that's what happened.
what about that water with Killer Croc surfing?
That was cool.
On that water. I was like, that's so Ninja Turtles. I was like, I love it.
I think Killer Croc was better portrayed here in this series than he ever has been.
I agree.
That includes like the movies he's been in, the old Batman television series and everything like that. I thought he was pretty dope here.
He was cool. He was very cool. Like in other media, he's kind of depicted somewhat like King Shark is here, just eating people and just like really strong. But in the show, he was, like I mentioned earlier, much more of a brawler, like a boxer. He was talented in fighting, which I think is a cool angle. Moving on to the final episode, episode 10. Flag and Clayface rescue the woman while Katana destroys the skeleton, but the Enchantress feels whatever she feels and goes berserk from pain. Peacemaker convinces the sea monster to turn on Croc and eat him. Cecile is wounded and gives his enchanted armor to Deadshot, granting him enhanced abilities. The Enchantress merges with June Moon. Now that she is free, she pays back the squad by fighting the skeletons. Deadshot equips the rest of the squad, except Flag, with pieces of the armor, enhancing their powers so they can fight the Skeleton Queen. Harley and Fiona distract the Skeleton Queen by disguising as each other before killing her. Fiona takes the throne and rewards the squad with a feast. Flag calls Waller to report what happened and that Katana disappeared. Confused, Waller says Katana was with her the whole time, and it's revealed that the Joker entered the other world and gained the power to shapeshift, masquerading as Katana, among others, to manipulate the war for his own amusement.
So out of all of the Super Saiyan powers that the squad got when they donned the magic armor, who had the best?
Clayface.
Clayface was pretty dope with the clay duplicates that he could create.
Yeah.
Well, that and just how he just, I don't know. I like the fit. I love the fit.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, his cape and everything. Yeah, that was good.
That drip.
So good. Exactly.
Peacemaker was probably my favorite. That like sword gun thing was hella cool.
Yeah, it's very Final Fantasy.
I really liked Harley Quinn's with the top hat and the chains with the hyenas at the end that she could control and everything like that. I thought that was pretty cool.
Although the hyenas came out of nowhere.
They were like magic manifestations, I think. They were pretty cool.
Yeah. That end battle was so cool. Like I just had the biggest smile on my face when they were all amped up with the armor. It was awesome. I was like, man, this show is cool.
When she started just literally piecing apart the Suicide Squad and just taking them out one by one, sending them all flying, I was glued. I'm just like, I can't look away. Like, I need to see every single one of them get their ass kicked. And when the dragon and Harley flew up towards her, I was like, wait a second, that's not Harley. Like, in that moment is when I realized that they did the switch. And then all of a sudden, you see King Shark's belly get ripped open and the sword fly out of it. I was like, oh, I've totally forgot about that.
Yeah, that was cool because Fiona was saying earlier, oh, she can only be defeated with the magic sword and it's lost. I totally forgot that it was still in King Shark's stomach. So right when, she was summoning the sword to her and it came out of her, and I was like, oh, snap. It just all came together. It was pretty awesome.
I totally remembered that it was still in his stomach, and I was just waiting for the moment that they pulled it out of him again. I was surprised they didn't do it sooner, but I guess they didn't really have a good opportunity to get up to the Skeleton Queen prior to that point. So they needed that kind of deception where she wouldn't expect Harley Quinn to wield the sword. So it made sense. It was a good moment, though, for sure.
The end battle was just so well plotted and mapped out, even with like the finishing blow with Harley Quinn batting the Skeleton Queen's head off into the horizon. And then, the sky turning from red to blue. It was majestic. I loved the way they did it.
Yeah, no, that was great.
But that does it for the whole series. I had a lot of fun with it. It was not perfect. There was some parts that didn't quite make sense, but overall, I would say I definitely recommend it. It's low stakes and somewhat confusing narrative. Don't really drag down an otherwise fun and absurd anime actioner with a strong squad of characters and kinetic visuals. I'm giving this 3.5 out of 5 stars, a fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, personally, I would probably give it a little bit of a higher rating, but I came for the fights and the straight up animation, and I thought they hit the nail on the head with everything they did. But when you do break it down a little bit more and you get into the actual story and the tropes and everything, it has been played out quite often in many different stories that have been told. So yeah, I could agree with that. It's definitely fresh.
I would agree with a 3.5 star rating. I enjoyed it. I think it was definitely a successful anime adaptation of these American comic book characters. I commend them for what they did with the action and the animation and everything. I just wish that maybe the story was a little bit tighter or coherent, I guess, fewer plot holes and stuff like that. But there's still a lot to like within the show.
Yeah, I mean, if you're showing up for the action, you are going to leave pleased. If you're showing up for a coherent story, I mean, maybe anime isn't always best suited for that.
Well, anime is very long form, right? So they always do drop like little things here. And then, maybe 4 seasons from now, we'll get an answer on what the hell they were talking about in the first season.
That's true.
Right. That usually happens a lot in long running animes. So I wouldn't really hold it against it because, again, most animes do that. So we'll probably get our answers very soon.
I guess my assumption while watching it was that this wasn't being set up for additional seasons. I thought it was going to be kind of a contained story. I actually thought they were going to get out of the Isekai by the final episode. That was kind of my assumption, just watching it offhand. But you're right. They're definitely playing the long game with this story.
I hope they are. I hope we get more seasons out of it. I hope a lot of people watch it and it becomes successful. Because I do think, as we mentioned earlier, that this is probably the coolest version of the Suicide Squad that has been translated onto the screen. Like, as good as James Gunn's film was, as cool as the characters looked in David Ayer's version, they don't top this.
I would agree.
No, I agree. I totally agree. Yeah.
But thanks for coming on board to review this series with us, Zach. I can't imagine having done this review without your insight.
I'll tell you right now, you actually changed Jonathan's rating from 3 stars to 3.5 stars.
Oh, wow.
With your enthusiasm. And I think you just made both of us realize that, yeah, this is actually a solid show for sure.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys for having me on. And yeah, that makes me happy that, I just kind of got more people excited for anime. Like that's my job. You know what I mean? That's what I got to do. So,
well,
yeah.
It worked. It worked for sure. Don't forget, guys, to check out Zach's show, Senjo World, part of the Dynamite Network. And also stay tuned for a new show that Zach is developing, and we'll be announcing that later on our show.
Senjo World, it's great. I love being part of the Dynamite Network. And this week, the battle that we have set up was actually pretty fun. Me and my buddy DJ Tom had a pretty good time going back and forth with this battle. And in lieu of last week's review, I'm doing a Sailor Moon versus Dragon Ball Z fight. So,
oh, shit. Nice.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting. Super glad to have you as part of the network. We'll have to have you on again at some point in the future. Always great talking to you.
And we'll talk to you later.
Sayonara.
Well, that does it for the review. AJ9K, help close us out.
Thanks for listening to Dynamic Duel. Visit the show's website at dynamicduel.com and follow us on Instagram at Dynamic Duel Podcast. You can support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/dynamicduel and joining a tier that works for you, or by rating and reviewing Dynamic Duel on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or on our website. Don't forget to listen to the other shows in the Dynamite Podcast Network, including Max Destruction, Senjo World, and Console Combat.
In our next episode, as we mentioned earlier, we will be doing a team duel between DC's The Outsiders team and Marvel's X-Force.
That's going to be a lot of fun. X-Force is going to have characters like Cable and Deadpool on it, and I think you guys are in for quite a treat, as all of our team duel episodes are.
And this is kind of a tie-in duel to this review because my Outsiders team is going to have Katana on it. Along with, like Black Lightning and Geoforce, it's going to be an awesome episode. Look forward to that next week. That does it for this episode. We want to give a big thanks to our executive producers, Ken Johnson,
John Starosky,
Zachary Hepburn,
Dustyn Balcom,
Miggy Matanguihan,
Brandon Estergard,
Nathaniel Wagner,
Levi Yeaton,
Austin Wesolowski,
AJ Dunkerley,
Scott Camacho,
Gil Camacho,
Adam Speas,
Andrew Schunk,
Dean Maleski,
Devin Davis,
Joseph Kersting,
and Josh Liner for helping make this podcast possible. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Up, and away!
True believers.
My anime kink is future dystopian cyberpunk mecha mommy milkers.